it's important for you to read the things I tell you to read. Make a point. It's important to read the things I tell you to read because we won't be discussing Acts chapter 7. But we will be discussing Acts chapter 7. Now you may say, how are we going to discuss Acts chapter 7 without discussing Acts chapter 7? Because if you notice something, I made it simpler for y'all as to what's going on in Acts chapter 7 is actually what goes on in Genesis. But it's in a bunch of different chapters, though. So I made it easier to y'all by saying, okay, just read this one chapter versus reading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 10, 11, 12 different chapters. Everything is in that one chapter. So now everybody understands why it's important to really do the homework. Because when we come in, then when I start talking about these chapters that I'm going to talk about today, you know what's going on. Everybody understand that? So you still got another opportunity because we're still going to be in Acts chapter 7 next week. Is everybody clear? Any questions? No questions? Now, I don't have any handouts for y'all today, but I will have handouts for y'all next week, which will be this week plus next week, which is an overall understanding of why the Israelites are important. Now, Genesis chapter 12. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12. Y'all brought y'all Bibles, right? Genesis chapter 12. Because typically when people pray, they typically say the God of who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that means this, and we didn't sing the song we sung just to be singing. Because in that we said what? God is going to fulfill what? The promise. What did he give to Abraham? A promise. That ultimately was what? Fulfilled. Now, Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 5. So once everybody actually goes and reads Acts chapter 7, then you will see how all this correlates with what we're about to talk about today. Everybody in Genesis chapter 12? So this is Abraham leaving the home that he knew to follow God. Everybody with me, right? And it says in verse 1, now the Lord had said unto Abram, so he's not Abraham yet, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred. So get out of this place that you're currently living in and from the family that you are around. And from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. Now, Abraham was being called out of what we would say is paganism. To follow a God that he really didn't know. He was getting to know who God was. Hence why we talked about last week what? Who was God. So everything is going to follow a pattern. Now, this country, if you read Acts chapter 7, you would know it is probably what? Mesopotamia. Those that read Acts chapter 7, that's correct, right? Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia, fun fact about Mesopotamia is in both Asia and Africa. Mesopotamia is actually where life began. So where the first man was created was in Mesopotamia. Looking puzzled. Like y'all ever heard that before? No? No. Fact check. Now, when I say fact check, be like research if life began in Mesopotamia, and it will say that's the birthplace of civilization. If you don't believe me, fact check. So Abram is called, before he's Abraham, he's called out of this country that he's living in with his father. And God is saying, I'm going to take you to a land that I will show you. Then in verse 2, he said, I will make of thee a great nation. Now that great nation is, you guessed it, Israel. And I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. So not only are you going to be blessed, but you're also going to be a blessing to others. Then in verse 3, he said, I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse thee. Because ultimately blessings come from who? God. And curses come from who? God. We can't do nothing unless God allows us to do the thing that we do. And then he says, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So per God's instructions, verse 4 says, so Abram departed. So he's leaving what he knows to be familiar behind. As the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot with him, which is his nephew. And Abram was 75 years old. Meaning he's 75 years old. That's old. 75 years old. First receiving his call from God. It says he was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Now, if you also read Acts chapter 7, it would say Charan, right? Charan and Haran is the same place. So far, does everybody see how this connects to Acts chapter 7? If you read Acts chapter 7. Versus why I'm having us read this. Because last week I said, if you want to start reading the book of the Bible, you should start with what book? No, not Acts. Genesis. Because that takes you back to what? The beginning. But like I said earlier, I wanted to make it simpler for y'all by having everything in one place. So if you read what Stephen was proclaiming, you will see he's proclaiming everything that took place from really Genesis all the way up to Christ.
So who is Stephen? Because I read that and I wasn't...
Okay. Now I'm glad you brought that up. Now, Stephen is one of the 7 chosen to serve as a deacon in the church. So a little backstory on that.
He's an Israelite, right?
Yes. So the 12 apostles were pretty much the ones going around preaching to the people. And the people were getting so large that they couldn't tend to everyone. So they in turn set aside 7 men. They told the brethren, look among you, find 7 men that's able to pretty much take care of the widows and the orphans and those that were in need. And Stephen was one of those 7. So that's a little background on Stephen. Now, as we continue to read, so far we've seen that Abraham lives in Mesopotamia. That could be confirmed in Acts chapter 7. And God is telling him, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. Which is ultimately the beginning of this promise of the Israelites. Then he also tells him that you got to get away from what you're familiar with. Your father is in paganism, so you have to separate yourself from paganism. Now, as we continue on, Abram was 75 years old when this happened. Then when we move on to verse 5, and Abram took Sarah, so her name is not Sarah yet, his wife, and Lot his brother's son, which I said was his nephew, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. Go ahead.
Was Lot married when we left Haran, or did he get married after he left Haran? See, I've read Acts chapter 7
Good
before,
question.
but in Acts it says that he was married,
Okay.
and that his wife looked it behind him when the city.
So that's your Sodom and Gomorrah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so as far as that question, it's a great possibility he could have been married.
Okay.
We don't even know Lot's wife's name, but we do know
She just mentioned as his wife.
Right. But what we do know about Lot's wife is that during the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, when God told Abraham, find me 50 people, and he went all the way down to 10 that are righteous. Then I won't destroy the city. And obviously he found no righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, so therefore he destroyed the city. And Lot's wife turned back because she didn't want to leave, turned into a pillar of salt. So that's a good question because it only mentions Abram, his wife, and Lot, and the substance that they had. So it doesn't really clarify pretty much all of the family members. But they probably all went with him, including Abraham's father. Now, as we continue on, so as they're progressing, they move from Haran to the land of Canaan. Now, the land of Canaan ultimately became the land where the Israelites dwelled. So just think on that for a moment. Because what did he tell him? I'm going to take you to a land and there you will be blessed. Right? That's what I said, y'all Bible, right? Just want to make sure we read the same thing. So Abram leaves and follows God. Now, let's look at Genesis 13. Genesis 13 verses 14 and 15 and 16. Now remember, I warned y'all last week. If you get bored quick, these next few weeks are probably going to be boring to you. Because what we're diving into, in order for us to really get an understanding of what's happening, we got to take our time with it. So like I said, I'm going to reiterate it again. If you get bored quick, I'm sorry. But it just needs a little more. So far we've determined about Abram. Now we're going to move into a moment where God reiterates the promise that he made to Abraham, who is Abram right now. Chapter 13, verses 14, 15, and 16. Is everybody with me? And it says, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him. So once they made it to the land that God told them to go to, the land of Canaan, now they decided, okay, Lot, you take whatever land you want. And he took the land closest to Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham took the remaining land. So that's where we are now. So after that, Lot was separated from Abram. Lift up now thine eyes. So this is God talking to Abram. And look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. So from the north to the south, to the east, to the west. For all the land which thou seest, so everything your eyes are feasting on, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed what? Forever. So when we see that word forever, and we know how the story ends now. Abraham, Israelites, Christ. So when we see that thing of forever, Now that kind of helps us, even though Christ ain't even on the scene yet, that kind of helps us to understand what? He's probably talking about Christ coming and reigning what? Forever. Because Christ is also a seed of who? David and Abraham. 16. And he said, I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth. Now, not the dirt, but as the dust of the earth. Can you count the dust of the earth? No. But he didn't just say that. He said, so that if a man can count the number of the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. So that lets us know, even though the Israelites ain't on the scene yet, but this promise that God is making is letting us know, even once they become a people, a nation, on the scene, you ain't even going to be able to count. Now, this is just a promise. Now, Abraham didn't live to see the Israelites become what they were. Hence the whole thing of the promise being made, that, as we saw earlier, that's what? Going to be fulfilled. Now, let's move to Genesis chapter 17. Now, aren't y'all thankful I put everything in one place? Like I said, I made it easier for y'all because really and truly, and like I said, next week, y'all going to have these scriptures that I'm giving y'all today. So y'all can get an understanding of when you read what I'm reading, and if you read Acts chapter 7, you will see that I'm just going in line of the order of Acts chapter 7. But going back to what I said earlier, that's why you have to read the homework first. So then when you come in, you'll be like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. And exactly where he is. Now, no penalty for not reading the homework. Because when it's all said and done, even though I'm standing here before you teaching, what if I came in unprepared? Y'all be looking at me like, hey, how he gonna teach us and he ain't ready? So ultimately the same thing goes for us. Meaning all of us, because even though I'm teacher, I'm still a student like y'all. Just so we get to understand. I'm not authority. I'm not. I know we have the thing of, well, teacher and student, teacher is typically authority. But I'm not authority. I'm still learning every day like y'all are. I just have a gift of teaching. So, as we continue on, we've understood, hopefully, that Abram leaves and follows God. So that is the start of the Israelites coming into play. And on top of that, we also have this thing where God is telling Abram that your descendants, the seed that's going to be coming from you, through by your son and grandson, so on and so forth, is going to be so numerous, it can't be. So now we are in Genesis 17. This is where the name change happens. So Abram now will become Abraham. Because we know him as Abraham, right? When we hear people talking, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. But before we can understand who Abraham is, we had to understand who Abram is. It's a name change. So let's see why he went from Abram to Abraham. So Genesis chapter 17. And here we're going to look at verses 1 through 12. Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 through 12. Is everybody with me? Yes? I need to hold on? Okay, we good? And it says in verse 1, and when Abram was 90 years old and 9. So that's what? 99 years old. So look how much time has passed between him being, 75 and him being 99. So this didn't happen boom, boom, boom. This is a long stretch. So when Abram was 99, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou what? Perfect. But this is not talking about perfection in the way of you won't sin, because obviously we know Abraham sinned just like everybody else. That's why I said all have sinned and come short of what? The glory of God. But this just means what? Who makes us perfect? God. That's why he said what? Walk before me and what? Be thou perfect. Because we're supposed to strive each and every day to be like who? God. Verse 2, and he said, I will make my covenant between me and thee. And a covenant is nothing more than a promise. And will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant, or my promise, is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. So from Abram will come many nations. Hence the whole name change. Which is why next verse says, verse 5, neither shall thy name anymore be called what? Abram. But thy name shall be called Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And we know that to be true because we know a few kings that we can call out just like that, right? King Saul, King David, King Solomon, and the ultimate king, which is who? Jesus. Then in verse 7, and I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations with the next. So not only is this with you, Abraham, but all the generations after you. For a what type of covenant? An everlasting covenant. So everlasting should take us back to who? Christ. Because we learned last week that what? Christ is God in the flesh, and God is the only thing that's everlasting. Everything else will what? Fade away. But God and his word will remain forever. So an everlasting covenant to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger. All the land of Canaan. So remember earlier we read that what? Abraham was to go dwell in the land of what? Canaan. So right now you're a stranger. Nobody really knows you in this land. But ultimately, by the time we get to the book of Joshua, the Israelites are doing what? Taking over this land. Now, is everybody understanding the connection that's being made? And why we have to really start here before, because most people are wanting to just jump straight in and start talking about Jesus. But how can you talk about someone when you don't even know where they come from? You can't. It's just about everybody in here has a life story, right? All of us. If you're living, I don't care how young you are. If you've only been living 5 years, you have a 5-year life story. All of us in here have a life story. But how can somebody truly understand your life story if you never started at the beginning? They can't. If somebody came in on your life story right now and just saw you as just very successful, they can't assume that you've always been successful. Can they? No. Because before you became successful, you had to what? Start at the bottom. So before we even consider Jesus being on his way back and his second coming and him ruling forever, we can't understand that until we understand Abraham. So I think I'm going to keep reiterating that so we can understand why we are even going through this and why we're even taking our time to go through it. Because once we hit the Gospels, like they said, we hit the ground running. Meaning, everything is going to revert back to what we're talking about now. Because if you read this Bible, anybody, if you read this Bible and fail to make the connections within the Bible, it's just sad to say you'll forever be lost. That's just what it is. Because it's not a coincidence that the same thing I'm reading to you now from Genesis shows up in Acts chapter 7. That's the long way from Genesis, right? So that means it must be what? Important. So this everlasting covenant that God is making with Abraham to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. In verse 8, we mentioned that this land of Canaan will all be yours. Now, verse 9. And God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generation. So the covenant of God and the ways and commandments of God stand forever. Because Jesus tells us, we can confirm that. Because Jesus says what? My word won't pass away. All heaven and earth will pass away before my word passes away. So 10, this is my covenant, which ye shall keep. This is the Lord speaking. Between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. Now, circumcision doesn't really take place in the Old Testament as far as a focal point of the male children being circumcised. Circumcision, does anybody know why circumcision was important? What protected the Israelites when they were in Egypt and the death angel came? One thing protected. What was over the doorpost?
The blood of the Lamb.
Blood. That's why circumcision is important, because of blood. Now, you may say, what they got to do with anything? They got a whole lot to do with a lot of things. Because what saves us? The blood. That's the connection. This physical blood from the circumcision of all the male children that were Israelites connects all the way back to Jesus sacrificing his blood on the cross for us. Goes all the way back to the blood post, to the blood on the blood on the doorpost, which brought about what we call Passover. And ultimately has Jesus as the Passover lamb. So all of this connects. I can't say that enough. All of this connects. Because where we're trying to get to is Jesus, right? That's why we're starting here and then we're working our way, which is why I keep throwing in the connections of how what we're reading connects to where we're going. So everybody can get an understanding of why everything is the way it is. So they all should be circumcised. Verse 11, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. Then in 12, and he that is 8 days old. And if you read Acts chapter 7, you would know that Abraham he did sacrifice Isaac, but that's not where I'm going. Abraham circumcised Isaac when he was 8. So I do recommend, and I will say this right now. I do recommend everyone, once I give you your paper, just go back and look at all the verses that I give you in Acts chapter 7. And you will see all the correlations of everything I'm saying today. Everything I'm doing right now is strategic. Meaning I'm doing it for a reason. Go ahead.
So that's the reason why they circumcise young boys now.
Yeah, it goes back to
Because of
that.
the covenant with the
Right, yeah, it goes back to that. Some of them, you said something?
Acts chapter
Right.
verse 5 or
Exactly,
6.
right. Yeah, so that's why, and you know, I'm thankful for those that did read Acts chapter 7. Those that didn't, you still got time. You still got time, which is why I said there's no penalty. You still got time, because we still gonna be in Acts chapter 7 next week. Because this is a lot to really unpack, which is why I'm taking my time with it, and I'm not trying to really rush it. If it seems like, oh, he going, oh, I'm putting me to sleep. There's a reason for that. So focus on verse 12, chapter 17, verse 12. And he that is 8 days old, as we said, shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations. He that is born in the house, or bought with money of any stranger which is not of thy seed. So that means anybody that's in your household, whether they're a direct descendant or whether you bought them from a stranger and they're living in your house, according to the laws of what Israel will have, circumcision will be important for all the male children. Now, as we continue on, the birth of Isaac. So we pretty much tackled Abraham. And another little fun fact, Sarah also had a name change. She went from Sarah to Sarah because she's also the mother of many nations. So now we get this understanding of why God is the God of Abraham. Now we're going to see why he's the God of Isaac. So when you hear that phrase, you won't be confused. Because I'm sure people probably wonder, well, why do people say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Isn't he everybody's God? Some people may think that. But if it wasn't for these promises that God fulfilled, then he really wouldn't be, and I want to say this in a way that doesn't seem offensive, but if those promises weren't fulfilled, then we wouldn't have a Savior to even have a right to the tree of life. Does everybody understand that? So that's why it's important when we say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now, let's tackle Isaac for a little bit. Genesis 21. Everybody, let's go to Genesis 21. Because if you read Acts chapter 7, you will see in there where Abraham mentioned that I have no child. So how can I have descendants when I don't even have an offspring yet? So let's see how all that came to be. Genesis 21. And we're going to look at verses 1 through 8. The birth of Isaac. Everybody with me, Genesis 21? And it says, and the Lord visited Sarah. So now her name has changed. As he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. Made a promise. Now the promise is being fulfilled. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age. Is anything impossible with God? No. Now, do we understand that? And for us to understand. Because some stuff is beyond, which is why we said what we said earlier. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or what? Think. So in their old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Then in verse 3, and Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, what? Isaac. So this first time Isaac comes on the scene. Now, it's a reason he's named Isaac. Let's find out why he's named Isaac. Some people may know why he's named Isaac. But it says in verse 4, and Abraham, goes back to what we read earlier, did what? Circumcise his son Isaac, being what? 8 days old. Goes back to what we just read in what? 17. Which also can be confirmed in Acts chapter 7. 8 days old. As God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old. So we done went from 75 to 99 to now he's 100. Just now having this son that was promised to him. Now, before Isaac was born, just to give you a little backstory, Abraham tried to rush the process of the promised child. But in that, Abraham, he did what his wife said, but it wasn't really all his fault, though. So we can't put the whole blame on Abraham. Because who told him to go lay with Hagar? His wife. He was like, hey, I'm married. I'm old. I can't produce you no seed. Even though Abraham knew God promised that we're going to have a son. But no, go in there and lay with the handmaid, Hagar. And then they produce Ishmael. So that's a little backstory. So Ishmael is older than Isaac. Just so we're clear on that. Because you may read later in Genesis on your own time. You can be like, hey, he ain't talking about Ishmael. I'm talking about everybody. If I can remember. Because some stuff I might forget. I'm human. But Abraham, verse 5, was 100 years old when his son, Isaac, was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh. Because God said, hey, you're going to have a son. They laughed. Because that's funny. We old. We going to have a child? That's why they named him Isaac. Now, everybody in here that has children, which is pretty much the majority of y'all, for the most part. When y'all pick y'all children's name, and some are strategic in the names that they pick for their children, and some are not. But we have to keep in mind when we pick children's names have meaning. All the names in the Bible mean something. And the people would name those names for a reason. Because Isaac right here means what? To laugh. We learn Abraham got his new name because what? He's going to be a great nation. And out of him is going to come an even greater nation. So names are important. I just want to throw that little nugget in. So God has made me laugh. That's why they named him Isaac. So that all that hear will laugh with me. Then it says in 7, and we're going to 8. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? Now, y'all may not know breastfeeding in the Bible. That's what they're talking about. Because not get too graphic, when children are born, the mother makes what? Milk. That the children in turn does what? Suck. For I have been born him a son in his old age. Then in verse 8 it says, and the child grew and was weaned, meaning he ain't sucking on the milk no more, from out of the mother's breast. Now he's grown older, and now he's on something else, a little more mature. Which I'm going to give y'all another nugget, which is why when we get towards the New Testament, there's a comparison of those that are babes in Christ that are on milk, and those that are mature are on meat. Everything connects. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you is, if you don't learn nothing else from my teaching, you're going to learn connections. Because everything connects. I don't care how you slice it, what part of the Bible you opens up, everything going to go back to Christ in one way or another. So here we have Abraham, just to kind of recap. Abraham has left paganism, has gone to a land that God is saying, this land is ultimately going to be the land for your descendants. In that, he received a name change, him and his wife. And also, he actually lived out the promise of this son that was to be born. And now we have this son is now grown up. So with this son being grown up, Abraham eventually dies, along with Sarah. She eventually dies. So now it's time for Isaac to be the next one in line. God is who? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So now, let's see the next focus of the birth of Jacob and Esau. Because in order for this line to continue, the next one up has to have what? Children. Go ahead. Okay. So in the process of Ishmael, the same way those that will become Israelites get blessed, Hagar and Ishmael also receive a blessing from God. So I mean, not necessarily, but I mean, because Ishmael is not the promise, it just ain't gonna come through that line. But ultimately, Ishmael and them still receive a blessing. There are 12 tribes of Ishmael just as there are 12 tribes of Israel. Most people might not know that, but that's true. What about his mom? Well, his mom wasn't that important. You talking about Hagar? Yeah. Well, I mean, his mama received a blessing, but we don't really know that much about Hagar in great detail to really kind of know what was her ending. So, but that's a good question. Any other questions? No? Now, let's look at Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. And we're going to look at verses 19 through 21, and then we're going to look at 24 to 26. So starting at verse 19, Genesis chapter 25, starting at verse 19. Everybody with me, Genesis chapter 25? And it says, these are the generations of who? Isaac. And you guessed it, who? Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Then it goes on to say, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. So he wasn't quite as old as his dad. 40 years old. And took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now, this is another thing to keep in mind. To not that, okay, I'm trying to see how to put this to not make people seem so grossed out, but these people were related. So in this, he's typically taking somebody from his family line and taking that particular woman as a wife to create the generation. Now, some people may be confused on why is that? Typically, they did that because they wanted to have people of the same faith to continue the line. Because the people in the surrounding areas were still in paganism. Remember, Abraham is called out of paganism. Meaning, what do you think he's surrounded by? Paganism. So, everybody else around him it ain't like how we live today where these people over here, they serve the God we serve. Those people over there serving the God we serve. That wasn't how it was. This is a thing of only certain people, which is typically your family and mine, are the only ones that's trying to follow the path that you're trying to follow. Just so we're clear on that. Any questions on that? Because I know that may be a little over people's head, like, why is that? That's just the way it was. So Isaac was 40, verse 20, when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban, the Syrian, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. We have another. Barren. Meaning, nothing is coming out of this womb. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, did what? Conceived. Because the only one that can make something happen out of nothing is God. And then in 22, we got something interesting going on here. It said the children struggled together within her. This is Jacob and Esau, twin brothers. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? Why is this happening, is what she's pretty much asking. And she went to inquire of the Lord, because who better to talk to about a problem than God? And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations. So this is interesting. 2 different nations are in your womb, but they're twins though. 2 manner of people, meaning these are 2 different type of people in your womb, but they're twins though. And they shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Now, without going too deep into this just lets us know that in this womb, we see a thing of a good nation and a bad nation. That's a simplified version.
Of the 2 twins, how can you tell which nation was the older and which was the younger?
Okay, so
I've read that several times.
Okay, so let's keep reading, because it's going to tell us.
Okay.
Now, it says, we left off at 23, 24. It says, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, meaning the water done broke. Time for the babies to be born. Behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. So the first lets us know what was older. Red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. Now, how many of y'all in here have ever heard anything about Esau coming from the pulpit? I'll be honest. You haven't. Because nobody really talks about Esau. But that's Jacob's twin brother. We say the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, but we don't add Esau. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it because Esau sold his firstborn right to his brother?
It's not really. Not. You in the ballpark though. Go ahead.
It's because he did not want to serve God.
He was not a servant of God. That's why I say you in the ballpark. He was not a servant of God. Yeah. So both of y'all answer the question together. That's why I say you was in the ballpark. You just hadn't hit the home run yet. But you was in the ballpark though. I give you credit for that. You was in the ballpark. So he wasn't a servant of God, and in Hebrews it tells us Esau was profane and a fornicator, meaning he wasn't abiding by the ways of God. Everybody's created by God, but everybody's not for God. Now, 26, it says, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So even though Esau is coming out first, Jacob is like, no, I'm trying to hold you back, brother. Probably because he wanted to come out first. And it said, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 old when she bare them. Now, does everybody know what 80 mean? 3 scores. Yeah. 20. Yeah. So 20 times 3 is what? 60. That's how we found a score is 20 years. Put y'all on game every time. Like I tell my Sunday school class, if you walk into a class and you don't leave with no new information, you haven't been taught anything. That's what teaching is. A score is what you done?
Oh, okay, right now.
Yeah, a score is 20 years. So 3 scores is 60. Now, y'all ready to go home, ain't y'all? Y'all ready to go home? Okay. Because this next part is my favorite part. Because this is where we actually introduce Jacob as Israel. So if you notice how we're moving through this, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And I'm hitting the important parts because it's a whole lot within the story that I'm not covering, but I'm touching the main parts that connect to as it all go back to Acts chapter 7. So right now, let's go to Genesis 32. Genesis 32. And there's a song that they sing. Many of you probably heard the song before. Said, all night I wouldn't let go. That's about Jacob. Wrestling. Now they say Jacob wrestled with an angel. But if you read the Bible, you would know that ain't true. Jacob wrestled with God. That's what the Bible tells us. Because he said, I seen the face of who? God. A man being in this body, and we know spirit is what brings the body of life, right? So therefore, there got to be the spirit of God within the body that Jacob wrestled with. But let's read it. Genesis 32, we're going to start with verse 24. Genesis chapter 32, verse 24. Now, before we actually read 24, I want to give y'all a little background on what's actually happening. Because you may just see this, like I said, Jacob was left alone, but wow, what's going on? Now, during this moment, by this time, Jacob has 11 children. Jacob is on the run from his brother Esau. Because if you couldn't tell, in the womb they had some friction. So once they got outside the womb, they still had some friction. So he's running from his brother Esau. And in the process, Jacob leaves a gift for his brother. But before he leaves that gift, he prays to God that his brother would not come and kill him. So that's the backstory. So as Jacob leaves with his wives, he had multiple wives. That doesn't mean God approves of a man having multiple wives. It's another conversation for another day. But he had multiple wives, so he took his multiple wives and his 11 children, and now he's gone from a land he was in. To now, we get to 24, where it says, and Jacob was left alone. Meaning now he has to get in isolation. Because the best place to hear from God is in isolation. Meaning not a whole lot of folks around you. Now he can get you out of wherever you are now, don't get me wrong. But the best place for him to deal with you is in isolation. So, and Jacob was left alone, verse 24. And there wrestled a man with him. Now, it don't say an angel. It says what? A man. Until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. So this place where his hip connects to the thigh. That part is being touched. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh is now what? Out of joint. That's how we know when the connection happens. Because now, what connects the joints? From the hip to the thigh. So now that's out of place. As he wrestled with this man. Then in 26, and it says, he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And Jacob said, I will not let thee go, except thou what? Bless me. So they go all the way back to what I said in the beginning. Who blesses? So who we wrestling with? God. Then in 27, and he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. Because that's all Jacob knows. My name is Jacob. Then in 28, and he said, so the man he wrestled with said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but what? Israel. So even if you don't get nothing else, now we should have an understanding of why God said he's the God of who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because right before our eyes, the fulfillment of everything God promised to Abraham is now unfolding. So you ain't Jacob, even though he's still going to be called Jacob from time to time. And he's also going to be called Israel from time to time. Because remember I told y'all, was this last week? Either last week or week before last. I think it was last week. When you see Israel in Scripture, it's typically one of three things. Referencing who first? Jacob. Or Israel, the people as a whole. Or Israel what? The land. Because remember, they're trying to conquer the land that was promised to who? Abraham. All this land of Canaan, what did God say? It's going to be yours, meaning your descendants.
Now, it's tied into that right in there.
Exactly. Right. That's why I said, y'all just bear with me. We'll get there. But we have to slow walk our way there. It's not a rushing process. Because trust me, when it's all said and done, if you don't get no understanding, then I failed as a teacher. That's just what it is. Because if I rush through something, oh, I got it, so they'll get it just as fast. No, everybody is on a different level. All of us ain't on the same learning level. Some people may not even get it right now. Which is why we're slow walking through it and taking our time so that eventually, once we finally get to Christ, maybe you will say, now I understand. Nothing wrong with that. So now we have this moment where Jacob is now Israel. But why is he Israel? Remember I said all the name changes are for a reason. Every name means something. It says, for as a prince, has thou power with God and with men, has prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. So now Jacob wants to know, who are you? I've fought against you and I've won, which is why his name became Israel. But now Jacob is like, who are you though? Reveal yourself. And he said, wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed the thing. So he didn't even give him no answer. He's like, you want to know who I am? I'm going to show you who I am. Because who blesses? God. And I guarantee you, Jacob knew that it was God. You may say, how do we know? Next verse. Because what? Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, for I have seen who? God face to face. And my life is what? Preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. So that means he limped. He walked on the limp. Because remember, his hip and all that, and the thigh and all that has been knocked out of socket. It's out of place. And then it says 32, just to show you how intentional God is. It says, therefore now the children of who? The first introduction of the Israelites. Because from now on in Scripture, we're going to see them called what? Hebrews, Israelites, and the children of Israel. So this is the first light bulb moment. Like Akira had, a light bulb moment. Like, oh, now this is why all this is important. So the children of Israel ate not of the sinuet, which is just the tendon. So that's the thing that connects this hip to this thigh. They didn't even eat that no more. Why? Because their father experienced his thigh and hip being knocked out of sight. That's just how intentional God is. So they was like, hey, we ain't eat that. Because of what happened to our father, we ain't taking part in that. Now, that's loyalty. Because that sinuet shrunk. I mean, this thing has gotten smaller. So Jacob ain't walking like he was regularly walking. Now, how long did he limp? Probably for the rest of his life. The Bible don't really tell us. But we just know that his hip was knocked out of socket by him fighting with God and prevailing, which ultimately led to his blessings, which ultimately led to what we know as the Israelites. Now, for the sake of time, Genesis 35 lists the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. All of them from the oldest to the youngest. Verses 21 to 27. And like I said, I'm going to give y'all these scriptures next week. Now, Joseph, and this is where we're going to end. So, for everyone that hasn't read, I've pretty much gone through Acts chapter 7, verses 1 to 19. Because I'm going to close out on Joseph. And if you go home and look at Acts chapter 7, verses 1 to 19, and if you followed along with everything I said, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Acts chapter 7, verses 1 to 19. So next week, that means we're going to do what? Acts chapter 7, verses 20, all the way to 53. Now, to wrap this all up, Joseph was considered, as they say, one of Jacob's favorite sons. Remember, he gave him a beautiful coat. And y'all can check this out. Genesis 37 all the way. I'm going to take you from Genesis 37 all the way to Exodus chapter 1. In a matter of less than 5 minutes. Beautiful coat he gave him. But his brothers were jealous. So jealous that they sold their brother into slavery and lied and said that their brother was dead. Killed the animal and dipped the coat in blood. Brought it back to the father. The father is weeping. Now to fast forward, as Joseph is in slavery in Egypt. Hence, you may wonder, how did they end up in Egypt? Enslaved for 400 years. Now you're going to find out. Joseph is accused by Potiphar's wife of trying to get fresh with her, old school term.
Yep.
So to the point that he left his clothing behind, trying to get away from her. But she lied. But it ultimately was found out that Joseph was telling the truth to the point he got promoted. So now he's high ranking in Egypt. From a slave to a high rank. To the point now, it's a famine back in the land of Canaan. So while a famine is going on, Jacob sent his sons over. Hey, y'all go over in Egypt, there's plenty over there. But when they get over there, they come across a nice young fella that they don't recognize. But it's their own brother, Joseph. And all in the process of that, Joseph said, hey, y'all come over here. Oh, this is Acts chapter 7 now. Y'all come over here, as well as Genesis 37 all the way to Exodus 1. Y'all come over here So they come over, Jacob, and everybody else, as far as the sons, and sons get married. So while they're there, Jacob continues to protect them because he's a high rank. So they're in this other foreign land of people they don't know that could easily kill them. But then Joseph dies along with his other brothers. But that don't mean the Israelites stopped though. Because remember what God told Abraham? Your seed is going to continue what? Forever. The patriarchs just died. That's what they called them in Acts chapter 7. The 12 patriarchs. So once they died, a new person was reigning that didn't know Joseph. So that created some trouble. Because now these Israelites are multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Now we in Exodus just that quick. Multiplying to the point that they was like, no, we can't have them outpower us or outnumber us. Because at the end of the day, an enemy might come and they might side with them over us. So ultimately, that's how the Israelites ended up being enslaved by the Egyptians. Now, the story don't end there. But you gotta come back next week to get the rest of it. Any questions? No questions?
Is this relevant to those men that be in the road, the black men, the Hebrew Israelites? They say they're the Hebrew Israelites?
That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay.
But hey, what's up? that's a whole nother conversation. Because to me, those people, okay, I'll put it like this. In the beginning of our very first session, what did I say? I said this Bible is about us. And when I say us, I wasn't talking about Christians. I mean, I'm talking about Christians. But I mean us as people of color. Because if you read the Bible, you would know that they say this Bible was given to us by a white man, but a lot of stuff in here just don't correlate with that. Not from what I've read. So, to answer your question, to me, those on the street corners, they got the right idea, but the wrong motive. Because you can't go around preaching hate when Christ preached love. So that's like a simplified. That's why I say they got the right idea, but the wrong motive behind what they're doing. Yeah. Any other questions? So next week, who y'all think we're going to be talking about? Who y'all think was born in Exodus chapter 2? You said it. Say it loud though. Moses. Because who freed them out of Egypt? Moses. So, go home, y'all. Read Acts chapter 7. Read Acts chapter 7. I'm telling y'all, if y'all go and read Acts chapter 7, y'all will get a real clear understanding of everything I just talked to y'all about.
Yeah, I read it. I don't know. When you broke it down, it all made sense now.
Yeah. So read that. Read that. 20 through 53. And if you ain't read none of it, 1 through 53. So you made it harder for yourself if you did read it. But if we don't have any other questions, no other concerns, then we can all stand and be dismissed.
You said Acts 7.
Next week we're going to be tackling Acts chapter 7, verses 20 through 53.
Yeah, we got to do that.
And something else I want to tell y'all too is, because this is so important, we're going to be talking about this for the next 3 weeks.